I guess we'll get started just because I'm so excited to hear from our speaker, Ashley, today. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Christy Omalanik, and I'm the Network Engagement Manager here at the Children in Nature Network. I'm glad you're all here. Thank you for supporting our work. And I'm joining you today from the land of the Muncie Lenape people, known as Basking Ridge, New Jersey. We invite you to share the native land that you are on in the chat. If you're not familiar with the history of your location, you can learn about Indigenous territories and lands with the native land map. We'll post that link in the chat as well. On this slide, you can see some different ways that you can support Indigenous people every day. This list has been adapted from Amplifier Art. You can learn about whose Indigenous homelands you're on and normalize land acknowledgements, educate yourself, amplify Indigenous social media accounts, and support Indigenous causes and businesses year round. Just a few housekeeping items. Closed captioning has been enabled. The chat is enabled as well, as you all know. Feel free to comment and ask questions for Ashley while she's discussing the different cultural approaches. I'm thrilled to be here today and to have Ashley Brailsford, Ph.D., joining us. Ashley is an early childhood educator and nature enthusiast who launched Unearthing Joy to guide the development of culturally centered, nature-based programming for families, community groups, and organizations that center the stories and contributions of Indigenous, Black, and other people of the global majority. Her experiences in teaching, professorship, curriculum development, and leadership in education, coupled with time spent as an outdoor guide, informs her programming and development process to transform outdoor places into cultural spaces that honor culture, explore justice, and unearth joy. Ashley was recently published in the collection Seeing Ourselves in Nature: Stories from Educators and Children of Indigenous, Black, and Other People of the Global Majority, edited by Jessica Fong, MAMED. I am excited to learn from Ashley firsthand about how we can make nature-based programming culturally centered and inclusive, which benefits all who participate. Welcome, Ashley, and thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christy, for having me. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to share about the work that I've been engaged in with this organization. I founded 5 years ago and give you all a little bit of background about it, which plays a huge role into what I'm going to share today. So, first, I want to just ground us in a moment of gratitude, as well as I always like to just think about this question, what's bringing you joy today or this week? And if you want to put that in the chat, that would be beautiful. I'd say for me, what's bringing me joy? This week is just really seeing the different ways in which communities are supporting one another, particularly our families who may be experiencing a disruption in their food sources. And so I do a lot of work you'll see here in a minute with our community garden. So we've had folks who really stepped into that work and just seeing the beautiful ways we're supporting one another is bringing me a lot of joy. So thank you all again for being here. So just some community agreements. I'm going to share a lot of different strategies as well as some tools you can utilize. And you may think, it's so much. I don't know. I want to do them all. And the reality is, choose one thing you want to try in your practice, and that's growth, right? One thing you can do consistently. Feel free in the chat to share your resources, your expertise. I always say I learn from one another and it's reciprocal. So what you share, I learn too, and that strengthens all of us. And when we do that, we get to unearth and inspire joy, and all of that leads to justice. So light up the chat with questions, your information, and resources. We really want this to be a true learning exchange. So, what we'll explore together, I'll share a little bit about my journey, my approach to this work, and it may resonate with some of you all. I'm also curious to hear how many of you all are parents, who are just interested in this versus educators who may be doing this work or coming into this work. And maybe you're both, but I'm wondering who's showing up, primarily as a parent too. I'm just curious about that. As we explore doing more work with families. And then we'll share a little bit more about these strategies to create culturally centered programs. I have a little time for reflection at the end. What can you connect to your practice? And then lastly, we'll end with questions. But Christy and the team will be monitoring the chat, so we'll pop in with questions throughout as well. So you don't have to wait to the end to ask. So, a little bit about us, just so you note, if you want to receive any community updates from me, I send out a newsletter that has some resources in there, and information about workshops and things that might be coming up that we're doing um, about quarterly or so-ish, just depends on the season. So I don't spam you, but you're welcome to go to the website and sign up for that. That's the best way to find out what we have coming up next. So, I'm going to share this video. Usually I launch into my background and then end up playing this video that repeats the same thing. So today I'm going to be mindful of that. And I'm just going to play the video and then I'll talk through a bit more.
I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. My family, we were always kind of spending time outside in different places. So that's kind of how my love of the outdoors started. And my mother had us in Girl Scouts, and I would say that kind of deepened my love for being outside. As I got older, I continued to do those things. Let's see, after college, I moved around and ended up here in Nashville and taught in the school district 1st through 3rd grade and was a Montessori teacher. Do you want to take a couple, Thea? You can put them in a hole over there. And if they start popping up and it looks like they're too close together, we just pop the plant out and we can replant it somewhere else, or you can eat it as a microgreen. So that's all microgreens are. So Unearthing Joy came about during the pandemic. That was a time I was working for a national nonprofit doing family literacy work all across the country. And I was pretty exhausted. So when the pandemic hit, it was kind of a nice time to reevaluate. Once I had my son, realized I wanted him to experience nature-based education. When everything kind of came to a halt in April, and the school system did too, I was like, here's an opportunity to figure out what I want to do next, what brings me joy, but also for him to engage in the outdoors more. And so we did that, and we played a lot outside. And it was kind of rediscovering both of our joy, our love of being outside, but also just how we like to learn. And observing him, I really got to see that.
Yeah. Oh! They immediately break when you pull them off. Wow, is that easy? Yes. Ooh. And you open this up like this. And you get it.
So I thought, okay, how can I take what I know about early childhood education, what I know about what families want and what they need, and merge that with nature-based education. And that's really how the work with Unearthing Joy was kind of born, was taking this idea of the importance of stories in the outdoors to reconnect us, and not just us, but all people sharing our stories in nature. I wanted to teach gardening in a way that wasn't typically taught or that we learned in schools or these master gardening programs. I wanted and needed the cultural element to be there. It was kind of a perfect storm because people were homeschooling a bit more during the pandemic, and they were looking for, but they still needed, community too, like I did. And so I tended to attract those families as well, and families of all diverse backgrounds that had similar values around understanding different cultures and different and being outdoors and wanting to be in community with other people. You have a place here, so you all can come and visit and play and stay even after we're here. If you want to come and work in the garden, you're welcome too. You are welcome here. You have space here.
So you'll see throughout the presentation, one of the core values for Unearthing Joy and how I do this work is through stories, and that we are uplifting the stories and the people who are Indigenous, Black, other people of the global majority, and centering ourselves in nature because for too often, nature education really was told and shared, and it looked very much like dominant culture, and so we didn't see ourselves in this space, and so for that to shift, more of our stories have to be told and uplifted by us. So, why is this work important? We're reclaiming our history and our connection to nature. And that's for all people, but particularly for Indigenous, Black, other people of the global majority. We've always been connected to nature, but terrible events over history have disrupted that. And so there's an opportunity now to connect in deeper ways with our children. And those opportunities have always existed in many communities, and now we're just uplifting that and what it looks like. The work is also important because we're talking about intersectionality to spark regenerative systems for care and education. And so right now, many of you all know, I see a lot of parents in the chat, parents and educators who wear both hats. You know that there's a childcare crisis. We're dealing with a food crisis right now. We're dealing with um, folks being lonely. So there's a mental health crisis. And for me, this work in neighborhood spaces and community with one another addresses all of these, particularly around food and in gardens. So we'll talk more about that as well, but it has the potential to really uplift and address these challenges and create new systems. And then lastly, my hope is that we're inspiring future leaders in climate and environment work. The young lady you saw in the video, at the time when that video was done, that was probably 4 years ago now. And that young lady has gone on to write articles. There'll be one coming out in March in Time Magazine for Kids. And she's doing really beautiful speaking experiences, talking about the importance of climate work. And so there's a lot of potential for how this work is beyond, and these programs grow beyond just them coming to us, when they're children. So, what are culturally centered programs? This is how I define it. You may have a different definition, but these are programs and curriculum that centers the stories and roles of Indigenous, Black, and other people of the global majority in nature. These are stories that are localized as well as they debunk stereotypes and images. So I put these two images here. These are local folks. I'm based in Nashville, which is the ancestral land and indigenous land of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee and the Shawnee. And Mr. Stewart here teaches young people, particularly African American youth, to scuba dive. And he also teaches about water quality, and they do water testing, all these environmental works related to water. And that happens here locally. And then this other woman is a local fisher woman who fly fishes. So some of my kids were interested in fishing. And so I intentionally was like, I need a woman, I need a Black woman who looks like them to come and talk about how she got into fishing. And she fishes all over the world. And if you know anything, I don't know a lot about fishing, but I know fly fishing is pretty tough to do, particularly in saltwater. But that's what she does and is very successful at it. And so I always like to uplift that, folks who are part of my curriculum, the community is curriculum. So when people say, Ashley, can you write us a curriculum? I'm like, no, your community is curriculum. What I can do and what we'll do today is share with you approaches. And through those approaches, there are strategies and tools that can be applied across contexts. Okay. So, um, just to give you context for my program, I know there are a lot of different programs out there. None of them have to look the same. You can create a program that works for you, for your community. Some are 5-day programs, some are 3-day programs, some are half-day programs. My program was just an hour and a half in the mornings, and we would meet for 6 to 8 weeks at a time in the spring and in the fall. So whatever you choose is perfectly fine for whatever the needs are and whatever your capacity is. You don't always have to be a full program. Some of the types of experiences that we offered or that I created were based around just ideas around what I thought young children deserve to learn about and what our communities deserve to engage in as well. So we weren't in nature just for the sake of being in nature, which is beautiful in itself. And if you create a program like that, great. But in our context, I thought it was important that we were also learning through a justice lens. That's a value for Unearthing Joy. And so the first series I created was called Gardening for Food Justice. So we had discussions even with young children, 3 and 4 years old, and there's ways to do this about what food justice even means. Who gets access to fresh food? Who doesn't? How far away is the grocery store? And why is that? And why, when you come to this neighborhood, there's not a full grocery store here? Look at the produce that's offered in that Dollar General versus here, right? So those are the type of questions and things we were asking for our children to think about and consider. And then what are some possible solutions, right? What does it mean to grow healthy food in this neighborhood? And then skills for liberation. So often in nature programs, people talk about wilderness skills. And that wasn't a term that resonated with me. And it wasn't a term that resonated with many of the families that I work with. But as I started to look at what we meant by wilderness, these were like how to build a fire, how to forage, and um, those type of skills. And I thought to myself, oh, these are skills my grandparents definitely knew and did, but we just didn't call it wilderness skills. These were like skills for our liberation when I thought about it, right? Like it allowed us to be free in many ways. And so that's what I ended up calling that series, and that's what we would explore together. We also had a creative arts in nature series because I knew not everyone's entry into nature was for nature itself, but some people are more inclined to engage through the arts. And we did one. I saw some folks are from a zoo here who are on this call with us. And so I actually worked with the zoo and we did Exploring the Animal Kingdom, and they came to our program and brought animals, and that was really neat for us to experience and to see zookeepers and animal scientists that look like our children was really important. And I really specify for them to bring those folks to our program to share. So then we do Farm Fridays where the kids could come and enjoy the setting. So these are just some pictures of our kids. We've had a beekeeper come out and the kids were trying on their bee suit and picking flowers and all the things. Okay. So what are the strategies, right? What are the strategies for creating a culturally centered nature program? There may be many other strategies, but I'm going to share the ones that I've used, and then you can chime in. Now, I will admit, when I was kind of revising this presentation for you all, I went back and forth with, okay, if it's mostly family, should I just go straight to, curriculum type things? But honestly, to me, if you're creating a culturally centered program, it starts with ourselves first. And I can't skip over that, right? If you're going to create a program, you have to really deal with yourself first. And so we're going to talk about these different strategies. So I'm not going to jump to curriculum type things and fun activities first. We'll get to some of that, but hang in there because to me, to create a culturally centered program, you have conversations and be doing work with the community to create the program. Remember, community as curriculum. Okay. So the first strategy I'll share is examining your bias through an anti-racist lens. So that means everybody. Okay, this includes everybody. All of us hold biases in different ways, and if we're not aware of them, the way in which we may teach information to children can be harmful. And so this is a resource. It's called Multicultural Teaching in the Early Childhood Classroom. When I do this workshop, when I know it's mostly teachers, I usually share the multicultural education framework I used to work from when I was teaching courses in higher ed around multicultural education and culturally responsive teaching. But we're not going to go into that today. But I adore this book. Mariana Soto Manning is a wonderful early childhood educator and thinker and practitioner. And she uses and includes teachers in this book with examples. But she also has a chapter with questions that help you to think about your positioning with your power and privilege in this work. So I encourage you to look at that. Um, and this QR code is a example of taking some of those questions and things from Dr. James Banks and making a self checklist about, how am I developing in these areas? So take a look at that. It's a free resource that I created, and you're welcome to look at that. Okay. Um, the second thing that I encourage folks to do, or second strategy, when getting into work of creating culturally centered programs, is shift your mindset about what counts as nature. Okay. Sometimes we come into this work and we think we got to be out in the forest, in the trees. And that may not be what is attractive to all of us. That may not be our experience with nature. We may just have a different experience, or may need a different way of engaging, right? And so, I'm going to show this quick little clip of one of the first experiences I offered to families was more so around murals, because my thought was if I can get families just to come outside, to one of our parks and learn about an important historical figure in Nashville, then that's a great entryway. And that actually attracted some families who said, I wouldn't have come to anything, that you had out in a different park or out in the forest, but this was interesting. So I had a muralist who came out and shared about this is Frankie Pierce. She was a really important African American who fought for women's rights, voting rights here in Nashville. And there was a park. I stumbled upon this park downtown and was reading the historical marker, saw the mural, and was like, oh. And then I looked at who the artist was. I was like, oh, I know that guy. I've worked with him on a different project before. So I reached out to him and said, hey, would you come do this? Talk about how you created this mural and why you like doing murals. And then he created this little fun activity for the kids. So I'll play this.
Just make sure you step back away from it so you don't get paint all over yourself. Yeah.
So a little more context about it. I know that was quick, but he had the children look around in the sky, and he said, draw what you see. So they were surrounded by a lot of tall buildings, but they were also looking at were there birds around and things, and they drew with a permanent marker what they were seeing. And then their painting of the mural was, throwing the balloon paint on there. But all of this to say, this turned into a really rich discussion with him on how did you paint that mural to scale? They learned about scale, right? Those are big, big mathematical concepts. Um, and other questions. How did you become an artist and why? And all these really, really interesting questions that we wouldn't have been able to explore probably in another context. So, just for you to think about, what are some non-traditional ideas that you would like to explore that occur outside? So I always start with the word outside rather than nature. Nature, the word nature for some folks is like, ooh, bugs, right? But if I say outside, usually that conjures more memories that are comforting for folks. So the third strategy that I like to share is building trusting relationships with people in your community, right? Who are the people in your community that can contribute to, your curriculum or program that you build? And for me, that person was Miss Pearl. I started my program at the community garden because I started volunteering there. And Miss Pearl owns that land that the community garden sits on. And so as we would go out there and work together, pull weeds together, plant, I got to know more about her, but realized she's a pillar in the community and she knows everybody and everybody knows Miss Pearl. And so those are people you can work with to build relationships with who may know people related to concepts you want to bring into your program, right? So she knew a poultry farmer, for example. I was wanting to do something on birds. And she was like, "Oh, my friend, she raises birds and chickens and ducks." And so we actually, that's what this picture is of. We went to her poultry farm. This black woman with a big old poultry farm doing incredible conservation work. And so I also wanted to lift people who weren't normally considered nature or conservationists or environmentalists, right? But these were everyday people doing really good work. Um, and so look for the goodness in communities too. This community is a historically excluded community and historically African American community from getting resources. But there's good when you look around the neighborhood. There's people planting fruits and vegetables in random lots. And so there's nature and it exists, and people are outside in community with one another in different ways. So, who might be a couple of people in your community who you could work with? Okay. Um, a fourth strategy I like to share is to ensure that we're creating inclusive environments that honor culture and promote well-being. And this is not just for children. I want to caution this. Sometimes we create programs or in our organizations, we're very focused on what we create for children to feel included without thinking about the staff and our team members. And so we need to have spaces where people feel acknowledged and feel safe and can show up as them full selves. So this is a picture of a team of people I was working with the past couple years through an organization called the Equitable Food Oriented Development Collaborative. And one of the ways we got to know more about one another, we would do we work all across the country. So we do these virtual, activities together. And one of them was cooking a recipe from this book, The Gaza Kitchen, which is a beautiful, beautiful cookbook. But one of our team members was Palestinian American. And so to learn more about the conflict, the war during when it first started, this is one way in which we were engaging with one another. And so, another part of safety, we're dealing with ICE raids in public spaces. So, if we're creating nature programs, how are we making families be able to feel safe to still go outside? Or those are considerations, right? For African Americans historically in the United States, going outside and being in nature has not been safe historically and even today at times without being policed. And so we have to acknowledge those things before we can talk about let's create a program, right? So thinking about, what does safety look like for my neighborhood, for my families that may be invited in, and for my team members. And then to discern who is aligned with your values. So when I created the program, I flat out said, listen, this program is going to center Indigenous, Black, and other people, the global majority. And so that was almost like an armor in that I didn't have to deal with people questioning the type of programs or why I was, talking about Black and brown people or why I was talking about food justice. So if you have values around that, stand in them and be firm on them and let people select in who need to be there, and those who don't align with that, let them go on about their business. So, this is the fifth strategy that I'll share. Transform your programming and curriculum to center the narratives and roles of people of the global majority. Okay, so we've talked about uh, ourselves. We've talked about shaping our environment to be ready to bring in families and children and our team members beforehand, right? That is foundational work. You can't skip to making curriculum. So you have to do the foundational work and it's ongoing work. And once we're set and we're doing those things, now we start to get into curriculum, right? And we want to bring in curriculum that brings in both past and present stories. Of diverse people. And I talk about diverse people a lot through the lens of race because that's how I'm oriented. But I'm also very aware we're talking about religion, we're talking about rule settings as an aspect of diversity, we're talking about gender, we're talking about religion. So all of those pieces are part of diversity. But the way I am oriented, um, is it often shows up through race, and that's okay. That's how I show up in the world. Your how you show up may be different, okay? but that we want to also balance these stories with examples of goodness. And I say that because they don't always need to be stories of what's happened to this community and why things are bad, but show the joy in these communities, and show examples of good in these communities. So real quickly, this is a picture of a woman named Karen Horlback. I was doing a project in Charleston, South Carolina with Tri-County Play Collaborative, and we were tasked with, and we received a grant to provide culturally centered programs to children, particularly in rural communities. Outside of Charleston is very rural. And this was a child care center, home daycare. And we brought in Miss Horlback because she has a lot of knowledge around sweetgrass baskets. If you're ever in that area, you know that the Gullah Geechee people, many of them, one of their cultural arts is sweetgrass basket weaving. And that's a connection to nature, right? Where does sweetgrass come from? What are things we can do with that? So, anyway, she brought in those stories, but also opportunities for the children to create and show how to make sweetgrass baskets in this area. So, it was culturally relevant, it was relevant in that community, and we were uplifting a community culture bearer while doing that. Okay. So, what are curriculum strategies and tools you can use? I'll talk and mention five, um, because these are ones that I've utilized, but you may have other strategies that you use as well. And so these will be quick, but know that I give whole workshops on each of these individually. So this is like meant to be an introduction here, okay? So, some of the strategies and tools that I use, I love multicultural literature. Folks who are often intimidated by the concept of culturally centered programs, because they're uncomfortable that they may get something wrong or offend somebody. I always say start with books, start with literature, and build activities from the ideas you see in those books, okay? Because you can always reference the story. The other strategy I'll talk about are family and land stories. I'll talk about community culture bear. So that's a person like a Miss Horback who has a lot of information about something unique to a culture and an area. I'll talk about the cultural arts, and I'll show an example of utilizing technology. So, gardening for food justice. When I created that series, I always open my circles and my time together, grounding us in a book about the topic we're going to explore. Okay. So, for those who are early childhood educators and you create what we call emergent curriculum, so you're observing the children and what they like and their interests, and you're creating curriculum from that. My program didn't do that because we had such a short time together, that I came with ideas already, created. But what you can do if you are a program that does emergent curriculum is you may introduce a topic and you go deeper with that topic based on the children's interests. You certainly could do that. So these are some wonderful books that I have utilized in my program and many others. But they connect to, these are some of the topics we explore. We explored urban farms, and we read this book about Will Allen. Actually, his daughter is running a wonderful organization I get to do some work with called Urban Growers Collective in Chicago. I mean, she is dynamic. Erica Allen, doing wonderful work there too with her team. But he, really put urban farming on a larger scale in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so that's a wonderful book about him. I talk about ancestral wisdom and the value of that through books. Urban Nature, Jaden's Impossible Gardens, a lovely story about a little boy who uh, created a garden living in New York City, and just from things he had around the house to attract nature to it, right? So that's a fun book. Pollinators. I don't have my favorite little book up here, but The Thing About Bees is a one by Shabazz Larkin. He actually lives here in Nashville and is an artist. And he illustrated this book, Growing Table, too. But it's a beautiful love story, but it gives really good information about pollinators in it as well. And then food preservation. I love this book by Padma Lakshmi and Tomatoes for Neela. I can make anything connect to nature. Okay, so even if the book is not directly meant to be a nature book, I can make it connect. So in this book is a story of her preserving tomatoes with her grandmother for freshness for the recipes they make throughout the year. And so I used that when I was talking about, the importance of food preservation. So, other books, resources that are great. Socialjusticebooks.org already has vetted books, multicultural books. And what I mean by vetted, just because it features a black or a brown character doesn't mean it's a quality multicultural literature book. I look now for books that are written for us, and by us. Because often our authors in the space have been pushed out or left out from telling our own stories. And so, what Social Justice Books does is go ahead and kind of does some of that work for us. We Need Diverse Books is another great source. And then there's several others out there who are doing really good work, librarians showcasing work from different diverse authors. So, um, let's see. Skills for Liberation was another program I mentioned before. And some of the things we explored through these books, we explored herbalism. My Tata's Remedies is a really beautiful story of a grandpa who is the neighborhood herbalist, and people keep knocking on his door because they have an ailment, and he'll get the, herb that might be needed to support whatever their ailment is. We talk about water quality, and we are water protectors. This is a beautiful, important book. It was the first book by an Indigenous author to be awarded a Caldecott a few years ago, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story. We talk about mindfulness in this series, and so being mindful like grandpa. Um, Navigation is a wilderness skill, right? But the way we talked about it, I had a parent in my program who was uh, now I've lost my words, but he's a really smart scientist. And he studied the stars and all the things. And why I don't know why I can't think of it. But anyway, he was from Puerto Rico, and we tied in and talked about how his culture used the stars and moon cycles to grow food and also to navigate. And we talked about Harriet Tubman's use of navigation as well. So that's different ways we bring in topics from these books. Um, for my zoo folks and for my people who just love animals too, my kids in the program were like, when are we going to talk about animals? So we created a whole series about animals, and brought in a beekeeper who's a Black woman doing this work in Nashville, but like a gardener, right? Just started to beekeep in her backyard. Um, and then we talked about local waterways, so creek fighting, why it was important. We know that the crayfish are now endangered here, and why they're important to the ecosystem, and how indigenous communities used crayfish to know what the water sources needed. Reptiles, zoos. So we explored a lot of topics, and there are a lot of activities that were inspired by these books. Okay. Um, the other tool that I mentioned were family and land stories. So sometimes you may be looking for a story that you can't find, right? That may mean that there's an opportunity for you to create it, or that you have a family story you can bring into your context. And so these are books. When I worked at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, um, several years ago now, they had the Omaha Public Schools had a program specifically for refugee and migrant families. They had a whole office in the school system dedicated to that. Omaha is one of the largest resettlement cities in America, and so has a lot of diversity of different refugees there, at least at the time that I lived there. And so, one of the things to teach English to families that they did was to encourage families to write their stories or to write stories that they wanted their children to still know. And so, these are some of the books that were written, but one of them that I want to highlight is this one, Somali ABC, because it directly connects to nature because the parents were concerned that the children would forget some of the names of things that were in their homeland. And so they created this ABC book, and most of what I saw in the depictions that they uplifted were words related to objects in nature. So, certain type of tree may be put in there for a certain letter, a certain type of food that only they could find in their country. So think about ABC books even in your neighborhood, how that might be used as well, or for to tell a family or a land story. And then you may have families in your program with different languages. And so maybe you create the books to be bilingual to help the children be biliterate or multiliterate. So there's lots of ways to do that. You could do songs or poems as well, or stories of memories. Usually I open my workshops asking, what's your favorite memory you have of being outside? And that brings in some really beautiful stories and allowing people to collage those with nature materials. Um, I also talked about another tool being community culture bearers. And those culture bearers can be parents who are in your programs, as well as I've already mentioned several community members. So our extension agent, our county extension was through the USDA at the time. Her name was Elizabeth Sanders, and she was a master canner and food preservationist, and she grew up doing this. So she came and talked about and show the different ways that she preserves what she grows. Our parent, Victoria, also shared, she's of Mexican heritage. And so she brought in the importance of honoring the dead and how they do that in their culture, invited families to bring pictures in, the children journaled. It was just a beautiful experience and talked about the significance of the marigolds. So lots of creative ways to bring in nature. And then Miss Cynthia, our poultry farmer, you can't see it there, maybe a little hard to see, but she has a duck. But she talked about the way she does conservation efforts for different breeds of poultry and why that's important to our ecosystem. Um, so all of those folks are important to our curriculum. Uh, then we do the cultural arts. Some of you all, like I mentioned, your first inclination may not be to bring in plants and animals, but maybe you connect with nature through the arts, and that can be through dance. For my family, we always have a big cookout every year on the 4th of July. And so the electric slide is a thing that happens outside always, right? And so that might not be your first like, oh, nature connection, but for some people it is, right? Um, and then I feature these other opportunities to bring in dance as well. Um, oh, and this book is a beautiful book, Josie Dances. So it talks about powwow ceremony and the beautiful ways in which she's engaged in that. Um, Music may be something. Had a friend of mine who is a music educator, and he brought in drums and connected sounds to nature with the kids. But these were some of the books that we read. Drum Dream Girl is probably one of my favorite books because about this little Cuban American girl. No, Cuban girl. I don't think it was Cuban American, but Cuban girl, where traditionally she wanted to play the drums. And everyone said, her family said, oh, you can't play the drums, you're a girl, right? But she ends up becoming this beautiful drummer, right? But we talk about what are drums made from? What's the connection to nature and music? And these were some of the other songs. I brought in Trombone Shorty. I actually got to see him play earlier this year. Uh, but if you don't know who he is, look him up out of New Orleans. He was a gifted and still is very gifted young boy playing in second lines, which is a cultural piece element in New Orleans. Shout out to if I have any folks from New Orleans. But those things take place outside. There's a cultural connection for folks. to second lines. That's really important. And that's something that can be explored as well. The visual arts, another part of cultural arts. I brought in these two books as well, Rainbow Weaver, as well as Rickshaw Girl. And so there's just so many books that can be a window into many other cultures, even if it's not your culture. Um, and this last one, cultural heritage. It might be you do it through culinary arts. We did some cooking in our groups too. But there may be other ways you want to bring in things as well. So I showed this little video about if you have a group that's big into fishing or horses or things like that, there may be cultural pieces tied to outdoor activities. So I'm going to play this little video too.
Okay, a lot of people believe that fishing is boring. First of all, my name is Herschel Lewis from Caribbean Surf School. I live here in Puerto Viejo, and I have a surf school, but I also like fishing. And fishing is an amazing thing. It's meditation, but it's also connecting to nature. And I want to show you this lure that we have in Costa Rica. We call it pollito. And when we're fishing with this, we don't make impact in the nature because we don't kill the bait. The baits, you know, if there's no fish is not biting, then we don't kill the baits. We use this as you can see, it's very dangerous when you're fishing because you can get this up in your finger, right, or in your toes. When the fish bite, and you're gonna take the fish out of it, you're gonna take the hook out of its mouth. You gotta be very careful. Okay, so the way to use this, they use it before they have the canes. This is a bob, it's made out of balsa wood, all right? And so you swing it like this, and throw it like David did Goliath. And then you pull it back like that. You can do it in different rhythms. This rhythm like this is to make the fish follow it underwater, you know? So we're gonna go and try out there with the kayak or on the paddleboard.
The reason I show this video, so this is when I was in Puerto Viejo, probably 4 or 5 years ago now. But it's again to show that these are everyday folks with these practices, these cultural practices. It doesn't have to be someone with the title of the title environmentalist, the title of something connected to nature. It's what is your grandparents doing? What is that neighbor next door doing that's connected to nature that's just as valuable that we can bring into our programs and allow them to be culturally centered. So I'll share really quickly these last two strategies. So you've gotten curriculum, a lot of curriculum ideas, but I also just want to uplift that once we've created these programs, it's really important that we're also advocating for equitable structures and justice. Um, it's not important that, we're the only ones making these programs, who may be in positions, but that families get to. So one of the things we did in Tri-County Play was created parent ambassadors, and we paid them to create their own, what did they envision as a nature program, right? Again, our definition may not be the same definition as someone else. So this mother with the basket on her head, she did games around the world and she brought in games from all over that the kids could play with. And then this mother decided, well, I want our kids to explore bubbles, and she made nature connection through water and the importance. But it was at this bubble store where they could make soaps so she made it connect, right? So providing those opportunities to allow parents to be actors in their children's nature connection and doing it with them is important. And advocating for structures in, our organizations and within the field, really challenging the field and disrupting this idea of what nature connection is, this stagnant idea, but that can be many things. And lastly, my hope is that you all share your ideas and create an action plan to inspire joy. You can share it through social media. You can share it through newsletters. You can share it through presenting at conferences, share it in staff meetings, share it with other parents, whatever that is. Show people what you're doing to continue to inspire joy, because I always say good breeds good. So the more we can do that, the more opportunity we have to see more programs like this. Um, so um, just to take a moment to reflect, what is one strategy or tool you learned that you'd like to incorporate in your practice? And you can enter that in the chat. And then just continue to reflect on how will you unearth and inspire joy. Okay. So what's one tool or one strategy you would like to take away and apply in your practice? As you're thinking about that, again, you don't have to do it perfect. Just get started, but don't stay where you are. Keep trying to improve. Know that this is a process, and that all children need inclusive programs. They deserve them. And building authentic relationships in your community will help to create that curriculum as well. Work in the intersections, so the environment, education, well-being, it's all connected. It's all connected. Um, and I'm happy if you want to reach out, to talk more about immersive experiences, some of these other workshops I do or consulting work, please do. That's some of the work that I do. And yeah, I want to leave a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Ashley. That was amazing. There were a couple questions in the chat, so I'll pull them up now. There were a couple of questions about the logistics of the program that you ran. Um, you said it was for 1.5 hours for 6 to 8 weeks. Was that every day or one time per week?
Yeah, once a week. So I think we were doing Wednesdays at that time, and I chose like 10 to 12 because we'd leave a half hour where the kids could play free play as well. But 10 tended to be a good time if we had little ones so they can get back to nap before
Mhm.
before lunch and nap time. Yeah.
Great. And then just so everyone knows, about 2 weeks after the event, in 2 weeks, Children in Nature Network will send out this recording, and I will pour through the chat and pull any links that were shared and include them in a resource doc. But some of our participants today are asking if the slide deck will be available as well. Would you be willing to share the slide deck, Ashley?
I usually don't since you'll have the recording. We've had some, challenges with intellectual property, unfortunately. So, yeah.
No worries. And I'm so sorry. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have put you on the spot, but I will look through I'll look through the recording again and pull all of those links that you
Yeah.
shared and put them in a document. So that's not a problem at all. Let's see. Someone asks, is the Tri-County Play Collaborative still active?
It's yes, not as active, but it's still around and you can certainly reach out to I think Adrian is leading that. I mean, the reality is funding was an issue, continuing funding support. So we had a state grant for a couple of years and then it went away and unfortunately many of us know that story too well, right? That those programs go when the funding goes. So, yeah. And someone asked people of the global majority that meaning of that. That's a
Mhm.
word that more people have been leaning into to share that white dominant culture isn't so dominant if we really think about the people of the world and that Black and brown folks or melanated folks or whatever term you're comfortable with, indigenous folks as well are the majority and that we need to reclaim. It's a way of reclaiming our power too.
Mhm. Great, let's see. Someone asks, what if there is a language barrier with the community you want to engage with? Thinking specifically of Spanish-speaking communities, and safety is already a major concern there, but is it not feasible to work with a community where you don't speak the same language?
Oh, it's feasible. It's feasible. Start with those folks, of course, and asking them how they want to engage. But look up, a good friend of mine runs a community language cooperative. And we used to do work in Dallas together on family literacy work, and we'd have rooms full of Spanish speaking families, but we used headsets where we were doing language justice work so they could speak in the language of their hearts. And there was simultaneous interpretation going on. So look in your communities. There may be local folks who are doing that work and who can offer that as a resource. A
Great.
really good question. I want to also just mention one of the ways my work is shifting for folks who may be interested is I'm moving more into movement building work. And what that means is I'm more interested now in supporting neighborhoods, especially as we look at our systems collapsing, supporting neighborhoods and locals with creating their own systems of care and education. And how do you do that, right? So we're looking at building neighborhood-based programs like this that are led by parents and educators. So that we're not always in crisis. And so tomorrow I'll be sharing with Promise Ventures this whole idea around this work. So if you're an organization, if you're a funder, if you know a partner, if you're a state organization interested in that work, I invite you to look on their website and reach out and join to learn more about that. And I do want to leave with this quote: every family and community deserves to experience the joy of nature in a way that is relevant to their lives. Okay. So however that means for them, that's how it should be. And that code, I do want to give you a code. Christy mentioned earlier the Seeing Ourselves in Nature book. And this is a code for 20% off. Yeah, happy to provide that. But these are all stories about nature education written by Indigenous, Black, other people of the global majority here within the context of the United States. And then these other two books, just because my good friend wrote this book, The 6888. It's a wonderful children's book that just came out about this group of Black women who essentially protected our lands in many ways during World War II by getting mail out to the soldiers to help with morale. So it's a powerful story. Again, I said I can always connect something to nature, and I can. And then Beatrice Looks for Home is another great one by Ron Grady's a great early childhood educator, by the way. So take a look at that. But feel free to reach out if you have questions. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Children in Nature Network, for your time. And I think, Christy, if you have any closing words, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your leadership skills and experiences with us, including shining a light on the history and current realities for BIPOC, Indigenous, and people of the global majority. We, especially here at Children in Nature Network, we know that you can't have a conversation about connecting children with nature without addressing these current challenges, and addressing our own biases and looking through a justice lens, even though these conversations aren't always easy to have. I totally appreciate your vulnerability and just sharing your experience and your talents with us. Thank you also for reminding me and all of us that nature connection can be many things. And as parents and educators and humans, we do have the ability to inspire joy. Sometimes I forget that. And you've definitely brought joy to me today. So for that, thank you so much. And in the chat, everyone else is so grateful. I know we didn't answer all of the questions, but we'll try to answer them in the resources that we send out. And just wanted to share with our network that thanks to our donors, we're able to offer these events free of charge, serving over 1,100 registered attendees a year. So in the chat, we're just going to drop a link to our support page if anyone feels so moved to make a gift to sustain this important work. We would truly appreciate it. And I'm sure there's also an opportunity to visit the Unearthing Joy website and make a donation there as well to continue Ashley's important work. So thanks everyone, and thank you again, Ashley, and we hope that everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.